Man, the Jaguars need a win, and the feisty Colts come to town with an old quarterback that might be able to get it done. We'll talk about that and more here on the crossover edition of Locked On Colts and Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to a crossover edition between Locked On Jaguars and Locked On Colts here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I am the host, Tony Wiggins, joined by Jake Arthur of Locked On Colts. And we thank you for making us your first listen. Reminder, we are free to subscribe to, and you can catch us over on the YouTube of both Locked On Colts and Locked On Jaguars. And then make sure wherever you hear your podcast, you tap into that location every single day. Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. My man, what's going on, my brother? You good? You ready?
What is up? I am great. Good to see you, man. How you doing?
Man, I'm doing all right, man. You know, we're going to run it down and give you the predictions with maybe a score prediction about how the game is going to go in segment number 3, segment number 2. We're going to talk about the Jaguars and their issues, but first we're going to start and kick this thing off in segment 1, talking about the Indianapolis Colts with Jake. Jake, man, got a win last week, but it cost you a little bit, and I was really, really upset with how they handled quarterback Richardson when he went back into the game after getting a hip injury. Now, Anthony Richardson is a big dude, and he's a competitor. The question I have for you, and you can tell us how that whole scenario went, did he ask to go back in the game? Was that him, and did the team just not protect him, or did they send him out there, and then Minkah Fitzpatrick say, no, y'all need to come get him?
Yeah, so what happened is he took off and got that big chunk run on the third down, took the shot right in the hip, and he left for a couple plays. He told them on the sidelines he felt good. He wanted to get back in and was ready to go. And then on that first play, you know, they're around the 5-yard line. They're in the low red zone. And the Steelers were in their base defense. And what they had drawn up, you know, was an RPO. And, you know, normally Anthony would be able to take that. And, you know, I'm guessing he didn't like start sprinting and jogging on the sideline beforehand. He just felt okay. But, you know, he kept up on when he took off to plant and run. That hip just said, no, sir, absolutely not. And that's when he discovered that he really had no acceleration and was not going to be able to, you know, plant off that hip leg and go. So from there, they just decided, you know, Joe, like a couple of plays later after they took Anthony out, they then formed a 2-touchdown lead. And they were like, you know, we're going in the second half. We got like a 17-point lead. Like there's really no reason to rush Anthony back out there if he can't be himself. Joe can manage this game the rest of the way out. So the optics of it didn't look great. And, you know, a lot of us up there in the press box were even saying, God, he just got hurt. You're running him already. Yeah. But, you know, that's what they had prepared for, you know, facing the Steelers base defense. They thought, you know, if he ran the ball, that he would get it in the end zone. But it turns out he was not himself. And so they just kind of decided to yank him from there.
Jake, so to be clear, is he out? Is he going to play? Are they going with Flacco? Do we not know, or they're going to hold him back?
Well, gun to my head, I think they're pretty optimistic he'll go. He was limited in practice today, so that's at least something. You're not starting from scratch and that he's not practicing at all. So he took part in, you know, the positional work and, you know, the early parts of practice, but when it came to like the 7-on-7s and 11-on-11s, the live stuff, he was not out there. And I do think he's going to be trending towards the right direction and playing on Sunday. Because they even said themselves, he doesn't even have to really practice for them to be comfortable with him playing, as long as he understands and feels he can execute the game plan. With that being said, I think you have to be cautious if you're them and saying, you know, Jacksonville is going to be under the understanding that he's not going to be his normal 100% mobility. Correct. So he's going to have to pass. He's going to have to be, you know, Joe Flacco as a passer in this one. Essentially, he's not going to be able to run around. So I think you got to decide there, like, how good of a game plan can you put together with Joe Flacco? Like, do you think you win this game with Joe Flacco, or do you think you need a probably not 100% Anthony Richardson? Because even if he practices in full tomorrow and Friday, the likelihood that he's 100% is pretty low. Because he even said today when we talked to him, I'm still a little sore, but I feel better than I did Sunday. And I asked him, I was like, when do you think you'll feel you'll be able to play? And he's like, he didn't have a firm answer for that. He's like, I don't know. We're just going to have to see, basically. So to be starting at that point when you're like 5 days out, the mobility probably will not be a huge factor for him if he does play on Sunday. He's going to have to be a primarily a passer, which he mostly is.
Right.
But what makes him so dangerous is that threat of running. So We'll see.
I almost think the Jaguars would rather face him wounded, if that's the correct term, or injured, as opposed to facing Joe Flacco, because they had a dose of that last year in Cleveland, and Joe Flacco sliced them up. The Jaguars have a lot of depth and injury concerns with their secondary. Do you believe? I think I just heard it in your voice, but do you believe, like, if he is immobile, and I think if he does play, the adrenaline will be kicking in because he's from about 75 miles southwest of here in Gainesville. So he'll probably have a large contingent of people here. He played every year in college. He played one game here in the stadium here in Jacksonville when they played Georgia. So he's going to be in a familiar area, familiar territory with maybe hundreds of people that know who he is. So maybe the adrenaline gets flowing a little bit. But your honest opinion, if he is not himself, and they have to play a quarterback from the pocket, wouldn't you rather that be Joe Flacco than Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, I'm kind of the thinking right now that if Anthony can't be fully Anthony, like if all he's really going to be able to do is pass in this one, I think I would just use Joe Flacco. And I mean, Jacksonville's pass defense is not doing well. They're not getting after the quarterback at any ferocious rate. So you're probably better just putting Joe out there in this one and letting Anthony get a little bit better. And you have an AFC South game again next week against the Titans. So, I mean, if there's really no threat of him running,
right,
then I probably wouldn't do it. I don't know, but like you said, there's the adrenaline. Anthony's going to want to play.
Of course.
But I mean, there's a lot of stuff they factor into their game plan that involves his mobility. And it's not necessarily just him running, but it's the threat of him running, getting outside and then pulling it in and deciding to, let it loose with a 15, 20-yard pass. Like, there's a lot of it that depends on just whether the defense thinks he can run or not.
What about Jonathan Taylor? And I'm asking this selfishly because I got him on both of my fantasy teams, but very, very dangerous player. Obviously, when you think about the dual component with Anthony Richardson, it's not quite Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson, but that dynamic does exist still when they're both in the game. And Jonathan Taylor, he can hammer and he can take it the distance.
Yeah, no, that combo's been really effective. I mean, Jonathan Taylor is a top 5 rusher right now. I think he's sitting at number 5 in the league in rushing, and that's with him really not having a very strong game in week 1 and leaving last week with his ankle injury. It's a high ankle sprain. It's reportedly a mild one, but even with a high ankle sprain, even if it's not one very severe, you've got to think that's closer to week than it is day to day. Now, he didn't practice today. And, with his history of ankle injuries, it's the same one that cost him 6 games in 2022. He had it operated on the next offseason, and then he missed the first 4 weeks of 2023. So I can't imagine him playing this week. I mean, maybe he does. I mean, nobody takes better care of their body than him. But it seems really, really, I'll just say ballsy to trot him out there already on Sunday with his history with this ankle. Like, I don't think you have, I mean, you need him out there to be at your best offensively, but how good is he going to be? I mean, that ankle still got to be swelling up if it's a high ankle sprain.
Right. I don't want to be disrespectful to the Colts defense, but everything don't worry about is their offense. But really quickly here before we get to segment 2, How's the defense look? They're 2-2. Obviously, they've had some impact on the season so far.
They're looking better in the last couple games. It was the sky is falling through the first week and a half. They allowed 200 yards rushing in the first half against Green Bay, and that's after Houston murdered them just the week before with over 200 yards. Like, they were giving up a genuine 250 yards per game, and then they got it together. Something clicked. Schematically, they made a couple adjustments that I think allowed the players to kind of catch their breath and realize, hey, we are a better run defense than this, because they always were a decent run defense unless they had huge injuries they were dealing with. And so things have looked much better. They are really, really banged up right now. Kwity Paye missed a game. DeForest Buckner is on IR. Tyquan Lewis just landed on IR. He was replacing Samson Ebukam, who is on IR. So there's blood in the water if you're an opponent right now. Juju Brent's their top outside corner, IR. Kenny Moore missed. Kenny Moore didn't practice today. He was out. So they're dealing with a lot of injuries. So the guys who are the next men up did a really good job, especially last week, for what they were asked to do against the Steelers. But at a certain point, you're just too banged up, and someone's going to take advantage of it. So we'll see how long they can kind of ride this high where the backups are performing at a decent level.
All right, well, we're going to reverse this in segment 2, and I'm getting ready for the hot questions, right, from you to see what the Jacksonville Jaguars will be able to muster up on what will be a special day at home for the Jaguars this coming Sunday. We'll discuss that and more here on a crossover edition of Locked On Colts and Locked On Jaguars. I got to let y'all know about Game Time, man. Game Time is the absolute truth. Y'all know one of the things that has been a pet peeve of mine is being on time. Always being on time is always just a big problem for me. And sometimes I've even been late to buy tickets. Usually you hear something like, hey, man, your lack of planning is not an emergency or constitute an emergency on my part. You hear nothing like that when it comes to Game Time, because they absolutely specialize in exactly that, helping you get last minute tickets. They also can toggle the information so that you're not sitting there peeling through on the site, going through all of these other tickets that don't apply to you. It will streamline it so you are looking right at what's available to you, and it is absolutely awesome. Seat views, all-in pricing, and lowest price guaranteed to any event, sports, theater, comedy shows. It does not matter. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time and download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL. That's Locked On NFL, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off your first purchase. What time is it? Man, it's game time. Segment number 2 here on the crossover, Thursday crossover, sponsored by Prize Picks. Locked On Jaguars, Locked On Colts. My man Jake Arthur here to join us. All right, Jake, go ahead and shoot, man. We're the only team in the league that haven't won a game yet. So I got all kinds of drama I can give you. Whatever you want, I got it. It's like a grocery store of misery over here. Whatever you want that's going to give you a headache, I'll give it to you.
Well, I want the tea. This 0-4, this is not the same Jaguars team that Colts fans know and hate. What's going on here? You got subtle finger pointing, I guess. I think fans and media are probably looking at Press Taylor. Doug Peterson is looking at the players, and who knows what the players are thinking right now. So, I mean, there's probably a lot of things to just boil it down quickly, but I mean, what do you think is something they've really got to turn around in order to get looking like a productive team again?
Playing a complete game. They've only got blown out. They got the socks blown off on national TV up at Buffalo. The other games, they were right in them. They had the ball, two of those games. They had the ball on the last drive trying to go score. And the one they lost to Houston, they actually had the lead until Houston scored in the last minute of the game with less than a minute to play in the game. They had the lead in that ball game. So they've been involved in 3 super, super competitive games. Now, there's a different way to look at the competitive, because what happened is The first two games, well, the Miami game the first week and then last week against Houston, they played well early and then didn't play well late. If you flip that around against, obviously against Buffalo, they didn't even show up that night. But against Cleveland, they played poorly early and then tried to muster it up and get to it late. The problem with the Jaguars is when you fix one pipe in the room, the pipe in the other room breaks. And when you fix that pipe, the one in the kitchen breaks. And they can never seem to do all of the things that they need to do to be successful, all in the 3-hour span of a football game. To me, that screams a lack of overall identity, and it also screams lack of confidence, because as soon as something starts going wrong with Jacksonville, you go, here we go. And you can look at your clock and say, we got about 20 minutes of this, and hopefully they don't lose the game because of it. And Trevor Lawrence has been one of the people right at the top of it. You watch him play, and he'll make 5 throws a game that'll make you say top 5 quarterback. Mm-hmm. And then he'll make 5 that'll make you say, what on earth is he doing? So there's been a lot of people blaming the coaching staff. They blame the offensive coordinator, which you mentioned it, so I'm going to just say it. It's ridiculous. And I'm not saying he's doing a good job, but what I am telling you is he is an extension of the head coach. So if you don't think he's doing a good job, the head coach isn't doing a good job either, because he taught him everything he knows, and he's his mentor. And they sit over there probably 10 hours a day talking about the game plan and putting the game plan on together. And it ain't like Press Taylor's in a hot air balloon somewhere and Doug Peterson doesn't know what he's about to call. He has a headset and he has a play sheet, and they're sitting there talking. So I keep trying to emphasize to fans that if he saw something he didn't like, he would stop it. This is not just like him trying to protect his friend. You know what this is? This is him actually thinking that dude is doing exactly what I would do in these situations, and they're not executing. So you get rid of Press Taylor and Doug takes over, it's going to be the exact same thing. Because if Doug Peterson is at fault, then guess what? He's going to be at fault whether Press Taylor is there or not, because he's sitting there listening to Press Taylor call these plays. They're injured on the back end on defense right now. The defense has actually played well in 3 games, but they're getting maligned too. Like you mentioned, no pass rush. The thing is Tua Tagovailoa was getting the ball out in 3 steps. Josh Allen was getting the ball out as soon, had a lot of pre-snap movement. Deshaun Watson is a dude that can evade the rush and get away from you. So the other day, they actually got pressure and caused a whole bunch of holding penalties. I think they got 3 on Laramie Tunsil, and nobody wants to talk about that. I think Trayvon Walker drew 3 holding penalties. Then doesn't count as a pressure, but it does count in terms of how well somebody's actually playing. So the pass rush is getting maligned right now, but they played 3 quarterbacks that get the ball out really quick, and then CJ Stroud, who knows how to move in the pocket. There's a lot going on with the Jaguars. It looks and sounds a lot worse than it is, but the bottom line is they're 0-4, so it's got to be pretty bad.
We've been through that kind of buddy thing before with Frank Reich and Press Taylor in the same building, and that it didn't end well as well. I know it's kind of easy to point fingers as well from, the fans can do that, but just something when I look at Jacksonville and I look at what worries me. Obviously, they're 0-4, but they're an NFL team. Like you mentioned, most of the time they're in it. Mm-hmm. When I look at it, I'm like, this run game looks like that is what really could pop offense and defense. It looks like they're really productive running the ball. I think 2nd in yards per carry, but is it just that they don't get to run the ball enough?
No, that's not what it is. What it is they popped a couple of big runs that have really, really slanted that ability to run the ball. Now, last week, they did take advantage of the fact that I don't think Houston's really, really good in the middle. The best interior player is Foley Fadakaze, and we've seen him here over the last couple of years in Jacksonville. Even though he played well last week, that's where Jacksonville really got a lot of their stuff from. And then every now and then they can outflank you because their guys are really fast. So you got Travis Etienne, and then you got Tank Bigsby. They don't run anything alike, but they're both really, really good runners about bouncing it outside and breaking tackles. So especially Bigsby with the breaking tackles part. So what you have is you look at those stats, and numbers don't lie, but they don't tell the whole truth, because the Jaguars get inside the 5-yard line and get a 1st and goal situation, and they can't run it then. When they have short yardage situations, whether it's 3rd and short or 4th and short, they don't run it then. So the point is those stats don't tell you that the Jaguars can't run it when they want to or when they have to. And I think that's because the offensive line isn't great. And then there's something to be desired too that is left to be desired by the play calling and the way they're calling quarterback sneaks for Trevor Lawrence from the 1 yard line and he runs the wrong way. So they're just not able to punch it in from short yardage to sustain drives or to score when they get in the red zone. And that's been one of their problems. And one of the reasons why the most points they scored, they hit 20 points one time this year. Other than that, they haven't even touched it. And I have to really think, did they even hit 20? Yeah, they hit 20 just the other day for the first time this season. But other than that, they've been in the teens, man.
I guess we're going to see here in a minute if either of us are confident in our sides to win this one and what it'll take.
All right, we will. We're going to do that in segment number 3 here on a crossover edition between Locked On Jaguars and Locked On Colts. After I let you know about today's sponsor, which is FanDuel. Man, I've been telling y'all, and we have been telling y'all about FanDuel for an awful long time because we like talking about things that are outstanding. You know what number one means, right? It's America's number one sports book. That means they're at the top of the food chain when it comes to sports book. And you can do it too on Sundays and have a big start to the season and a big return on FanDuel. All you're going to do, man, is understand that when you have your wagers and you're watching your bets, you no longer have to leave or refresh the screen to go somewhere else. You can check on your games right then. Latest stats, view live play-by-play. If you got your eye on fantasy, you can keep your eye on your wagers and your fantasy football guys and their stats, and you don't have to change. But first, you're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets, which is guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. I didn't say it's guaranteed when you win. It's guaranteed, period. All you got to do is place your first $5 bet. So get on board with America's number one sports book at FanDuel.com. All right, third and final segment of today's episode, which is the Thursday crossover Thursday here, sponsored by Prize Picks. Make sure you download the app and use the code Locked On NFL, all one word, LOCKEDON NFL, to win $50 instantly when you play. That is Prize Picks. It sponsors all of our crossovers here on Thursday across the Locked On Podcast Network. And make sure you check them out. Well, I don't know. I think I have to let you know that it's a pretty special day. They're going to put Tom Coughlin, the greatest coach and GM we've ever had, in the Ring of Honor. They're going to wear those old uniforms that they wore back when Tom Coughlin was the coach. The place is going to be fired up. I think it might be raining a little bit. So I think the Jaguars are going to pull this out, man. And I'm not being a homer because if you listen to Locked On Jaguars, anybody can tell you I have been beating up on this team. I've called for people to get fired. But sometimes in the NFL, what happens is these formula games where they gut it out and they muster up a win. I'm going to even pick a score for you, man. I'm going to wait till you tell me what you think is going to happen before I pick that score, though, Jake.
All right. Yeah. So I don't know if it's as big a deal there in Jacksonville as it is with the Colts, but the Colts have not won there since 2014. It's a thing. We call it a curse around here. And, you know, this feels like one of those games where the Colts probably don't they probably don't have much business winning it, but they still pull it out. You know, we don't know what's going on at quarterback. Probably not going to have your running back. Your defense is just beat to smithereens right now. I don't know. This feels like one where there's going to be a lot of ugly moments on both sides, probably, which will lead me to my keys in a moment. But I just got to think, like, if the Colts aren't going to win in Jacksonville, like right now against an 0-4 team, when are they ever going to win in Jacksonville? So I'll give it. It's going to be a one-score game, but I'm going to give the Colts the 24-17 win in this one.
All right, all of that makes sense. And I forgot about the curse. And the worst team I ever saw fielded, here was the year Urban Meyer was a coach, at least until this season. Oh. This team is talented. That team is just bad, right?
Yeah.
You guys are supposed to make the playoffs, and you couldn't because you lost. to that horrible team.
There were people in the stands wearing clown masks. They didn't even want their team to win.
I didn't want it. They knew they were going to get the first round pick, but no, they didn't want to win. And then I believe that y'all lost another one to Gardner Minshew once down here. So
19-20.
Yeah, man, it's just been buck wild down here for the Colts. I'm going to go 16-13 Jaguars. And the only reason I'll do that is because I think it's going to be an ugly game. I think the weather's going to be ugly. We do have a very good field goal kicker, though. Young kid by the name of Cam Little that can hit it from 55 yards. They haven't been able to punch it in. I'm going to say the Jaguars get a couple of key turnovers in this game, all right, and that they don't commit any turnovers. But that's the only way that they win. If the Jaguars commit multiple turnovers, they will be 0-5 because they have just not been able to overcome turning the ball over, especially in the wrong on the wrong side of the field. They just have not been able to overcome that. But I think they're going to gut this out and find a way to win, and it'll be good for Monday morning at the water cooler. But I don't think anybody's going to look at this game and say, okay, they turned it around. No, I don't think that's going to happen at all. But I think it'll give a reprieve to the coaching staff for at least 1 week. And then the key is going to be after that. Okay, now can this jumpstart them? Can this get them going? And can they squeeze out another couple of wins and find themselves 3-4 in a couple of weeks? Or if they're 0-5, it's time to kiss the baby, man. And I think you're going to start seeing people talk about them getting out of here.
Yeah, so I think in this one for the Colts, same thing. They got to take care of the ball, whether it's Anthony or Joe Flacco. Both of them have a tendency to just grip it and rip it. You know, when Joe won Comeback Player of the Year last year for Cleveland, he was still, I don't want to say playing reckless, but like he was willing to take chances. And, you know, he turned the ball over a little bit. And we obviously know Anthony has the 6 interceptions. But again, I think whether it's Anthony or Joe, I think Jacksonville is obviously going to want to try and make them pass it, even though that hasn't been their forte, stopping the pass. So the Colts are going to probably have to pass a little more. You just can't be reckless with it. Take care of the ball. I mean, Jacksonville, I believe they've only got 1 takeaway so far, right? So, like, if you're turning it over against a team that doesn't take the ball away, it's like, God, you're really shooting yourself in the foot there. Get a couple big plays in the passing game. You know, this is a defensive coordinator that put the Colts through hell last year when it was Colts in Atlanta. Now, Michael Pittman was not in that game, and Gardner Minshew was the quarterback. So, like, it's just a perfect recipe for disaster there. But, you know, the Colts got some guys that can win those one-on-one press man matchups. You know, Alec Pierce has been outstanding through the first few weeks. A.D. Mitchell, if he can form any sort of chemistry with his quarterbacks, he's cooking DBs one-on-one. It would be a great week to maybe get him jump-started because he is legitimately open a lot when he's out there. His playing time is just dwindling because he's kind of having some rookie errors. But then I think, you know, the Colts defensively, they've had to deal with Trevor Lawrence getting the ball out immediately and not being able to lay a hand on him. That's been the recipe a couple times. They have not been able to pressure him because he's getting rid of it so quickly. So whether or not they do that, they've got to harass him. It's really tough because that defensive line is so banged up, but they were still able to make life difficult for Justin Fields often last week. But if it's a quick passing attack, you know, swarm to the ball immediately and just try and harass Lawrence the best you can. Week 1 against Houston, the Colts defensive philosophy was, you know, just stop the run as a byproduct of getting to CJ Stroud. I don't know if, you know, they got to play that level of harassment towards where the ball is going. Right. But I am worried about Jacksonville being able to run on them, especially a guy like Bigsby who can break those tackles. The Colts linebackers have stepped it up in the last couple weeks, but we've seen some atrocious tackling early in the season. And again, I mentioned, you know, near the top, like at a certain point, how long can you overcome your injuries?
Right. And the Jaguars have those interesting injuries in the secondary. So what's going to be the cat and mouse here and the chess match here is, do you try them with those big, tall receivers? Do you get after them, and do you test their depth in their secondary? And then for Jacksonville, I think they need to run the ball. But one thing is if they go to not plays, but more players over plays, Brian Thomas Jr. has looked the part. And Mitchell, Mitchell and Brian Thomas was a source of a lot of arguing and fussing between me and a bunch of people in the pre-draft contest. And now I don't think they trade Brian Thomas Jr. for Marvin Harrison Jr. with the way that they have fallen in love with him and how he's played. So he has been a pleasant surprise for Jacksonville. I just hope that they understand that they have to run the ball first and then set that up with a little bit of play action to be able to take those shots down the field. But if they come in with the with this disposition, like this predetermined disposition that they're just going to throw it, and then not try to win the game, I think it'll be a disaster for Jacksonville. So I got 16-13, and you got, what do you got, 24 to what, 17?
24-17. And I'm glad we got to the point where we can mention Brian Thomas Jr. because that is another one that scares me. And that is a guy who we thought almost was a foregone conclusion to the Colts. We all kind of thought he would be a Colt, but Latu kind of fell into their laps. But no, I don't know that the Colts have anyone healthy right now that really matches up well with him. So this might be a good day for Brian Thomas Jr., another good day.
Yep. All right, we're going to see. And if you want to hear about it, make sure you check Locked On Colts, Locked On Jaguars. I know we'll do a postcast after the game, and I know you guys will do whatever you normally do up in Indy, and I'll be looking for it because I run Locked On NFL. I won half of it anyway, and I love using you guys' clips on Locked On NFL. Speaking of which, make sure you check out Locked On NFL. Is make it your second listen with the madman Tyler Rowland early every morning. It's a double dose now. You get him early, and then you get me in the middle of the day at the barbershop where it's a little laid back, man, but we talk a whole lot of NFL with the experts, the local experts from the Locked On Podcast Network that know your team like no one else. All right, man, have a good game. You guys, I hope everybody stays healthy. Of course, I hope the Jaguars win, and you hope the Colts win. We'll just have to see what happens. You guys make sure you take care of each other and enjoy the action on Sunday, and we'll see you here the next time on Locked On Jaguars and Locked On Colts.